Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, let's talk about deep diving crankbaits because we're getting into June, and anywhere from late May all the way through June, this is a time period where the fish on many of the lakes around here, especially on the Tennessee River, Tennessee River is known for current-related structure fishing, so offshore ledge fishing. We've got big schools of fish out there, and sometimes one of the best ways to get those fish to fire up isn't a slow-moving, bottom-bouncing technique. It's a bait that just bombs right through those fish and gets them fired up, and sometimes even on heavily pressured lakes, that's the best way to get a school, eating. And sometimes you can catch them on every single cast once you get them fired up. So it's a lot of fun. But one of the best baits for fishing offshore on these large schools where the fish start getting competitive is a deep diving crankbait. And for years, I avoided deep diving crankbaits because I didn't fully understand them. I felt pretty overwhelmed because there's a lot of different options out there. I just never considered myself a deep cranker. But since I've moved to the TVA and since I've really started to recognize those scenarios where a crankbait is very, very effective, even nowadays with so much pressure, it's become one of my favorite tools to catch fish on these ledges. So I just wanted to share with you guys some of my favorite crankbaits for fishing out deep. Because I pretty much keep it very simple. I still am not the authority on deep cranking. It's not something, I would talk to somebody like Keith Combs about deep cranking. But for me, I have a certain number of tools that I like to use out there, a certain number of baits, and I really don't explore, get outside that lane that much, I guess is how I put it. I pretty much keep it simple, and when it's working, those are the baits that I like to throw. If it's not easy for me, then I'm probably going to do something else. So that's just my approach to it. One day I might get way better at this to where it is a primary strength, and I've got a bunch of different like sneaky little baits that I like to throw. But for now, I keep it simple. So first, let's define deep diving crankbait. For me, a deep diving crankbait is any crankbait that easily, on 12-pound test line will get down to the 10-foot range plus. Okay, there's some crankbaits that'll get down to 25 foot on a regular cast. And of course, if you do that long lining or strolling technique, you can get down even further. But on a nice lengthy regular cast, there's some crankbaits you can get down to 25 foot, and there's a lot in between. So that's kind of the broad explanation. There's a lot of different categories of deep diving crankbaits. For me, I break it into three different kind of groups. You've got the deep divers, okay, that go from 10 to 15 feet. Somewhere within that range, okay? And then you've got the extra deep divers, like this right here. These go from, 15 to 20, something like that. And then you've got, they're not even extra deep. That's not what I call them. They're just the 8XDs and the 10XDs, those really magnum crankbaits that can get way down deep. And really, they're pretty specialized. They're not a crankbait that you're going to be throwing a lot. But in those scenarios where the fish will eat them and the fish need a big profile bait, they can be pretty good. But let's start with the deep diving crankbaits. Each of my boxes, I've got other baits in here, but there's not a whole lot of baits that I actually reach for more than, a couple of them. Now, I do have some like, custom-made crankbaits, like this one right here. These are actually really good. I might throw them during a tournament, but I'm probably not going to throw them during practice much. They tend to I've tested them. They run really good, and they just are kind of those ones I just pull out during game time. But my favorite crankbaits overall, honestly, that I reach for the majority of the time And I need to mention this before we get started, because you're going to see a common theme amongst all the crankbaits that I'm pulling out. I am not in any way associated with Strike King. I'm not sponsored by them. I don't get a discount. I don't get free product. You know, I'm not trying to get kudos from them or anything like that. But these are crankbaits that I've been using for a very, very long time, and I trust their crankbaits. Now, the one thing I will say about you know, Strike King's crankbaits is that you're gonna have to learn how to tune a crankbait. Because very, very few of them come out of the package to where they're perfectly tuned. So you might need to just tweak it just a little bit. And I'll show you at the end of this video. I'll try to remember and show you how to tune a crankbait properly, which is a skill that you're going to need to learn. With most mass-produced crankbaits, that's the case. There's some companies that go to great lengths to test every one of their crankbaits. But despite the fact that I love Strike King's hard bait line, for the most part, they do require a little bit of upfront work. So when I get one out of the package, I'll replace the hooks with some Hayabusas, the TBL 930s, and then I'll go ahead and tune the crankbait. Throw it in the water, make a short pitch, 30 feet, see which direction it's wanting to go. If it's going straight down and it's nice and straight, we don't need to do anything, but that's a rarity. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that out because this is not a sponsor plug, but I know how, you know, how one-dimensional this whole video is going to be as far as the brand, because I love these crankbaits. But anyways, the first one that I like to throw, this is the Series 5, the Strike King Series 5. This used to be the deepest diver that they made back in the day when they had like the Series 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is the crankbait that was kind of their deep diver. Very, very similar to, and kind of, I don't know if knock-up would be a fair way to put it, but very, very similar to the very popular at the time, the fat-free shad. Okay, very, very good, well-known fish catching crankbait, and I love the fat-free shad too. But the Series 5 is really, really good. You can see it, the bill comes kind of straight off the nose here. It's got a good moderate wobble to it. It dives down, you know, effectively 10 foot. 10 foot on a good cast, good length cast is pretty much where this crankbait's going to live. If I had to throw one crankbait for any structure where I'm meeting that 10-foot range, oh, this is it. This is an awesome, awesome crankbait. Caught a lot of fish on it, and so, you know, this is one that I reach for a lot if they're on those somewhat shallow ledges. But I'm not fishing it any less than probably 8 foot either. So that's kind of the key depth range. But the Series 5 is really, really good. And then you move up and you get into the 5XD. Okay, the XD series, essentially what they did is they took a similar bill to the original Series 5, and then they at the end of the bill they had this little elevated portion, so it allows this bait to dive down a little bit deeper. This right here is a good 12 to 14 foot range crankbait. Okay, this is a really, really good one for that. Now, once you're getting into that 14 or 15 foot range, you may need to start only using it when you're not casting against the wind. You know, if you're casting against the wind, you're probably not getting the distance that you need to get to that 14 or 15 foot range, because we always want to maintain bottom contact if you're from up north. But anyways, this is a really good crankbait. As you can see, some of these crankbaits I'm going to be pulling out, you can see that I'm using bigger hooks. These are size number 2s, the Hayabusa TBL 930. These crankbaits, most of them can handle these bigger hooks. So upsizing, you know, usually you're going to be using like a 3 or 4, but a 2 works really, really good on these 5s, 5XDs, and then also the 6XDs that we're going to be talking about. But these right here, 5XD, my favorite for that kind of you know, you're starting to get into that moderately deep range, you know, that 12 to 15 foot range. What else we got in here? That's pretty much it. You know, we've got some fat-free shads that, you know, honestly, we don't use that much anymore because I don't want to get on a fat-free shad bite and then not have the ability to go buy some of those crankbaits off the shelf. That's, yeah, is what it is. The Strike King 5 and 5XD generally do me pretty well. All right, so this is my next box. I've got a couple different things in here. We've got like a DD22. These are very, very well-known deep diving crankbaits. You know, these actually work pretty darn good, but they're still not my absolute favorite. You know, I don't tend to throw the DD22s all that much, and for no other reason than I just don't have the experience with them. All right, we talked about the 5XD. Or the 5, Series 5 being the deep diver. At one point it was, and then they came out with the Series 6. This is just the original Series 6. Honestly, I don't throw this one as much because I'll usually be reaching for the 5XD, which kind of reaches a similar depth zone to the Series 6. But I do throw this one right here. So if I'm trying to reach the... Oh, that's not what I'm reaching for. If I'm trying to reach, oh, let's pull this one out. This one, we actually, some friends of mine, we went fishing yesterday and they pulled this one off the bottom of Lake Chickamauga. Perfect condition, got a little bit of rust around the eye, but somebody lost this in the last few days. Really good color. But anyways, this right here is the 6XD. Same deal as the 5XD. You've got that slightly raised lip on the end there. This is a really, really effective crankbait for 15 to 18 foot range, bordering the 20 foot range. You know, obviously, if you downsize in line, you get down to that 8 or 10 pound test, you could probably get this one down to easily 20, maybe even 22 feet. Because you have less resistance. But for 12 pound test, really 18 feet is kind of the max for this one on a regular long cast. But this is a really, really good producing crankbait. I've caught a lot of fish on this crankbait. As you get to the 6XD though, it gets harder and harder to tune these baits correctly. Part of it, I think, is because you know, it's hard to actually see whether or not the crankbait is running perfect in the water because it dives so deep. If you pitch it out 30 feet in front of the boat and reel it back in, it's diving so deep that you can't exactly see which way it's favoring when it runs. But it gets a little bit trickier to tune the 6XD, but once you get it tuned, it is a really, really good crankbait for out deep. Other than that, we've got some Spro Little John DDs. These are actually really good crankbaits. They do a really good job, you know, with as far as a deep diver. These are very aggressive bills on them. They will dive down to that 20 foot zone pretty easily, and they're really good casters. They've got a great weight transfer system in there. So I've got a few of those, and I've caught fish on them. But between the Little John DDs and the 6XDs, those are my extra deep divers that I like to reach for. And I sometimes throw the Series 6, but not all that much. Okay, so let's get to the final crankbait box that we use. And this is like just another class of its own. So you've got two of these Magnum size crankbaits. You've got the 8XD and the 10XD. To be completely honest, I like the idea of the 8XD. I've thrown it a little bit. But I don't have a lot of fish catching experience with the 8XD, but it does fit a kind of a void that is left open between the 6XD and the 10XD, which is probably why they designed this, is I wanted a bait that wasn't quite as big as the 10XD, but I wanted a bait that could get down to about the same depth. So this bait will get down to 22, 23 feet pretty easily on 12-pound test. It's a really good one. Like I said, I say it's really good. It looks really good in the water. I've caught fish on it, but I don't have a ton of years of experience with this bait, but it is good. But let's talk about the 10XD. The 10XD is one that it is exhausting to throw, but it's so super productive under certain circumstances. You know, when you're dealing with fish that are real deep, that don't generally see crankbaits, and they're feeding on big bait fish like gizzard shad, a 10XD is you know, about as good as it gets under those scenarios. There's a lot of guys that catch a lot of big bags on those deep diving crankbait lakes. You go down to Texas, a 10XD is pretty much common, and nowadays people throw it so much it doesn't even feel like that big of a bait to them. To me, it's because I'm not like fishing a deep diving crankbait all the time, it is very exhausting, and it requires good tackle to throw. I'll still use 12-pound test on this, but this bait right here will dive down to like 25 feet pretty easily. In fact, yesterday I was throwing it out in 25 foot of water and watching it go, you know, on a decent cast, get all the way down to that depth to the bottom with my forward-facing sonar. I could see that. It's really hard to feel anything other than this bait because it's creating so much resistance. And this bait especially is going to require a lower speed gear ratio reel. You know, look for one that is in the 5 range, something around there, because it will wear you out throwing this thing and cranking it back in. But 10XD is a great crankbait, and it's really, if you look at it, it's just a upsized version of the 5XD. Okay, it's the same exact crankbait, just really big. All right, and you look at side by side, I mean, there's a huge difference in size. So it has the same action, just scaled up to be massive and to appeal to those fish that are big. I actually just caught a 6.5 the other day on it, and that was kind of fun. But anyways, guys, those are the crankbaits that I like to throw. Those are the, you know, they're really no secret, but if you're looking to get into the deep cranking game, these are some crankbaits that just work really well. Again, I'm not sponsored by them. I don't have you know, a dog in that fight or whatever they say, but they're just really good. So I do want to show you the setups that I like to use for each of them. For the 5s and 5XD, I use the, all these are the composite series, or it's the Fitzgerald Fishing All-Purpose Composite Series. This is the 7.3 heavy action. That's the one I like to use with the 5 and 5XDs. 12-pound test fluorocarbon, I like to use the Seaguar Invisex because it's nice and soft. I think it allows this bait to work the way it should. And it's not real wiry. And then I use the 6.6 to 1 gear ratio VLD10. That is the setup for that one. And then the next two, what I'm using, so you've got the 6XDs, the extra deep crankbaits. I move up to the 710 heavy composite series rod, and I use the same reel and the same line generally. Of course, you can manipulate the depth of these baits will run by decreasing to get extra depth, the pound test rating, or you can increase the pound test rating to use the same crankbaits in a shallower scenario. So just keep that in mind. And then the 10XD, I use the same exact setup as the 6XD, but I'm going to be honest about it. So the rod handles the 10XD perfect. The 710 heavy is an outstanding 10XD rod. Really good. Got a ton of backbone, but it still allows you to lob this bait. It doesn't feel overpowered at all. though the I've been saying 6.6 to 1 gear ratio with the VLD10. It's actually 6.5 to 1. But as much as I love this reel for all my crankbaits, except for the 10XD, you know, with the 10XD, it just, to me, I think you need a lower speed gear ratio, because I think that I'm overpowering this reel with this size bait. There's just so much resistance. It's really hard to crank. And so I would try to go for a reel that has a bigger handle, a bigger spool, and has a lower speed gear ratio. Now, I'm sponsored by Fitzgerald Fishing, but just because of that, you know, my experience throwing the 10XD, if I was to choose a better reel for just this bait, I'd have to say that you should probably go to a lower speed gear ratio reel, just because it's going to wear you out. Flat out, it's going to wear you out. And if you're going to have to throw it all day, you need a reel that's going to allow you to do that without just, you know, tuckering you out by the end of the day. But anyways, guys, tuning a crankbait. Let's do that real quick. All right, this is it. The pair of pliers that I would normally use. We'll just use a regular a pair of pliers, you know, needle nose pliers, but we'll use this 8XD as an example. All right, so like I was saying, not a knock on Strike King. They make phenomenal baits. They make a lot of great colors, but as with most mass-produced hard baits, when you get them out of the box, they're probably not going to be tuned perfect, okay? What you're going to end up doing is, once you tie these baits on, make sure you change the hooks out, get premium hooks on there. You know, some of these companies will put premium hooks on, but even those hooks aren't going to last very long. So make sure that you're swapping them out for premium hooks. I use the Hayabusa TBL 930s, but once you get it out of the box, put new hooks on it, cast it out there just a short distance and reel it in and see which direction the crankbait wants to go. Sometimes they're so out of tune that they'll actually start spinning and they won't just dig straight down. But that's what you want, is you want a crankbait to dig straight down and not like veer to the left or the right. But if this crankbait decides to veer to the right, it's kind of digging and kind of rolling to the right a little bit, what you're gonna do, okay, so it's digging, it's moving this way. What you're gonna do is you're going to take your pliers, pinch, not the little split ring, but take your pliers, pinch the tie that's actually attached to the bill. And this is a terrible pair of pliers. You do not want to do it with this pair of pliers, because I'm not even able to get a grip on it because it's split ring pliers. But anyways, what I would do if I actually had a legit pair of pliers is I would just slightly bend this eye to the left a little bit, okay? So to the opposite way. So I'm just gonna kind of roll it over just a little bit. Very, very slightly. So you don't want to overcorrect too much, because you don't want to weaken you know, that eye, because then it'll become impossible to tune. So all you want to do is just bend it just slightly the opposite direction that it wants to run, and then go ahead, pitch it in the water, see if that was enough. Sometimes you've overcorrected a little bit, and then you have to bring it back the other way, but that's exactly how you do it. It's not the best demonstration, but that's essentially the gist of it, is you're just rotating that the opposite direction that the crankbait wants to run. That's how you go ahead and straighten these out. But again, I know that I made it sound like you know, Strike King has a problem with that. It's really all those mass-produced you know, hard bait companies. It's just you can't have the kind of quality control that you need when you're mass producing an item like a deep diving crankbait, and so it's, you know, it's super easy to do it as soon as it gets out of the pack. And even the high end crankbaits, even the ones that are custom made in somebody's garage, I've got, and they've been absolutely terribly out of tune once I get them out of the pack and in the water. So, you know, I don't want to seem like I'm picking on any brand, but anyways, guys, those are some thoughts on deep diving crankbaits. I know I probably rambled on a little bit more than I should have, but those are some really, really good crankbaits that are going to allow you to catch a lot of fish out deep when the conditions are right. So let me know what your crankbait choices are in the comment section below. Let me know if you have any questions, and make sure that you trust the process. That is the #1 thing, and I'm going to see you out on the water.